order.
The record reflects we are back in session. Parties and counsel are present. All members of our jury and our alternates are present. Our witnesses back on the witness stand. And Mr. Langton, when we direct.
Yes, please. Agent Bowles, back in 2014, you initially did the work. You were mapping out historical data from the CDR. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You were not a certified member of the CAS team in 2014.
I was not.
You became one in 2016?
Yes.
And at that point, based on subsequent training, you updated your report and that report diagrams to conform with the standards you had been trained on in 2016.
Yes, sir.
Did that change your analysis of the historical data that you plotted on those diagrams?
No.
Is your testimony still consistent that you rely on the first tower hit because that is the one that the cell phone makes, not the network?
Yes, that's the cell phone selects the tower for the initiating tower.
And anything that happens after the cell phone selects the tower out of the control of the hands of really anyone? It's the network's job, right?
It's a combination of the network and also the coverage area of the neighboring tower.
Would you say that your edits or changes to your reports were an improvement upon those that were done in 2014?
I believe the changes I made added to the accuracy of the report.
You were asked about the CAS policy and whether or not you complied with, I think it was something, uploading your data in 2014 to some database or shared file or whatever it was.
It'd be a case file system.
Case file system. That policy, did it exist in 2014?
Not to my knowledge.
And you weren't a member of the CAS team in 2014, correct?
No, I was not.
And in fact, let me show you page 2 of that policy, or little, it's actually double little I. When would that policy come into effect?
Effective date, January 5th, 2018.
And was there any previous revisions or existence noted on that issuance?
No.
So this policy did not exist in 2014 or even 2016?
Not to my knowledge.
Well, now you were asked about a series of phone entries. Mr. Jackson, can I have attorney 2, please? I'm going to direct your attention to call 8151. I believe you have the full stack of records up there in front of you.
I do.
That's a little easier to see. 8151 and 8152 was one shown to you by Mr. McGee. It was numerous ones we went through. Do you recall those?
Yes, I do.
And
holding department is going to have to reach.
looking to the right, you saw the first call, 8151, was mobile to mobile, correct?
Yes, sir.
Logged the cell tower data.
Yes, there's a tower connection.
And the next entry was also a mobile to mobile that went to voicemail, is that correct?
Yes, that's what VMB is indicated.
Looking back at that record, they occurred at 12:11 p.m., both of them, did they not?
Yes.
Do you have an explanation for why this could happen based on your training experience?
It's likely one entry where the first line could be an incoming call, which is then routed to voicemail. The calling parties were the same in that call.
If the calling parties were different and the first entry was already connected with cell tower data, and that same type of entry occurred, what would your training experience tell you?
I'm sorry, can you ask that one more time?
If the first entry was a connected call to a, say, number X, and it showed cell tower data,
Yes.
and the second entry that was forwarded to voicemail or went to voicemail was from a different caller, what would that tell you based on your training experience?
That would be a separate entry or separate activity on the phone.
And would it tell you anything about what happened to that second call to show on the records that way?
Control,
I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to get back to is you said in your direct examination that activity that is shown on the CDRs is based on a request for resources, right?
Yes, when a cell tower is generated.
Okay. So it's the phone doing something to connect with the tower, correct?
Yes.
That would be, in the case of making a phone call, would that not be dialing a number and hitting send
Yes.
using old 2G flip phone technology, right?
Yes.
If a call came in and you were already on a call, and that would be called waiting, if you switched over to that call, that would be some type of activity from the phone, correct?
Correct.
Or if you ignored that call, that would be some type of activity from the phone, wouldn't it?
Yes, I'm not sure if that would generate a tower or not, if you ignore it.
But then, let me have, Mr. Jackson, can we have, can you see that? I'm gonna direct you to call number 8999 at 2:03, or sorry, February 3rd at 5:01 p.m. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
We'll scroll across, it's highlighted for you. Was that directed to voicemail?
Yes, it was.
Does it show cell tower location?
It does.
Looking at the call before it, that's at 4:55 p.m., right?
Yes.
No indication that, let me get over to elapsed time. No indication that that was an ongoing conversation when that call was forwarded to voicemail, correct?
That's correct. It doesn't appear that there was a conversation going on.
So, in the calls that you were showing on cross-examination, a majority, if not all of them, isn't it true, showed some type of cell phone activity occurring on the previous line, followed by another activity being forwarded to voicemail. Is that correct?
Yeah, I recall some of those entries that were shown had that information.
But when we look at February 4th, scroll down here to February 4th. And I'm going to focus on these lines that I'm highlighting for you. Calls 9076 through 9083. 9076 occurs on February 4th at 5:48 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And its total capture time, so elapsed time and seizure time is what?
2 minutes and I believe 42 seconds.
43 seconds?
43 seconds, sorry.
Okay. And that's at 5:48 p.m. So that call would have taken you to 5:50, maybe 5:51.
Yes, approximately.
The next activity is at what time?
There's a call entry at 6:09.
And then 6:10, 6:12, 6:17, 7:18, 9:04, correct?
Yes, sir.
All of those went to voicemail, didn't they?
Correct.
All of them show no cell tower data connection, correct?
That's correct.
What does that indicate to you from your training experience?
As I stated on direct, based on my training, it was that the phone could be off the network, off on airplane mode. However, based on cross-examination, I would like to confer with AT&T to give a more accurate answer.
Mr. Jackson, go to the overhead, please. So last night you were asked to do some homework by Mr. McGee, correct?
I was.
And did you bring that homework with you to court today?
I did.
So let's show that homework. What was that homework, please?
He asked me to map the calls on February 6th from the high desert, the same ones we just went over during cross-examination.
And did you do so?
Yes, I did.
And how did you do it, though, compared to what was shown in cross-examination this morning?
I mapped out the originating and terminating towers to include the sectors used, as well as the beam width of 120 degrees for each of those sectors.
So I'm showing you what's been marked as 919. This is the call from February 6th at 10:46 a.m.
Yes.
Is this the homework you did last night?
Yes, it is.
Does this, to the best of your drawing ability, show the 120-degree service area of that sector?
Yes, the black sector was the originating, and then the blue shaded sector was the terminating tower.
Now, looking at, for example, Exhibit 913, one that you were shown this morning by defense on cross-examination. I'm going to try and squeeze these next to each other. Can you explain why one has such a narrow indicator of directionality versus yours that shows the full 120 degrees?
I've seen this on the left side before, the defense exhibit. It's a means of mapping cell sites, and it typically shows a more narrow beam width because it's just indicating the direction of the antenna.
So it doesn't show the full service area connection covered by that antenna in any sense of reality, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's more narrow than what I would expect the coverage area to be for a particular sector.
And you did not produce the exhibit 913 that's on the left, correct?
That's correct.
So, absent sitting down and remapping the map, you cannot attest to its validity or accuracy, can you?
No, it wasn't my work, sir.
And you, I believe, said on cross, it appears to be similar, right?
Yes, it looks similar.
Okay. Similar is not necessarily accurate or the same, is it?
Objection argumentative.
So then moving on to the tower hits off quartzite. Is this the homework you produced for Mr. McGee?
Yes, sir.
920, the exhibit number. And does this show the full 120-degree coverage area of both cells oriented on that tower, azimuth 10 and azimuth 85?
Yes, it does.
And it attempts to portray the overlap area, is that correct?
Correct. It's that area in between the two sectors.
Now, these lines, the black lines for azimuth 85 and the blue line for azimuth 10, are those impenetrable walls of service that if you're just outside of them, you won't connect to that tower?
No.
Why not?
It's just our, for lack of a better term, a theoretical boundary based on our experience in analyzing phones and tracking phones and from the training that they cover approximately 120 degrees.
So, are you familiar with the term bleed over?
Yes, I've heard that term.
Describe it for us, based on your understanding.
There's, when the energy or the signal comes off of the tower, it be similar to, you know, spraying a garden hose into a garden. It's going to have a strong coverage area, but there's going to be little splashes of water outside of what it is that you're trying to get wet. And the energy from a cell tower is very similar. The vast majority of it is going to be in the dominant coverage area, that center part of that sector. As it gets out towards the edge, it's going to get a little more weak. And then there is a little bit of bleed over to some degree, and that's sometimes that's built into the system to allow for smooth handoffs from one sector to another without dropping balls.
So for the 1132 call, is this the homework you conducted at the request of the defense?
Yes, sir.
And that shows the 120-degree service area for azimuth 10.
That's correct.
That was exhibit 921 for the record. And exhibit 922 similarly for the call at 11:52 a.m.
Yes, that's correct. It shows the originating tower up to the north, and then the terminating tower in blue down to the south.
(923). That also your homework for the call at 11:53.
Yes, sir.
Again, black is the originating tower, blue is the terminating, and it shows the service area, the 120-degree service area.
Yes, sir.
Exhibit number 924, basically the same questions. That was your homework.
Yes, sir.
Black is originating, blue is terminating.
Yes, sir.
Shows the 120-degree service area.
Yes.
And then lastly, 925. Would your answers all be the same to those same three questions? But I want to focus here on the February 6th at 1:30 call for just a second. Again, the black azimuth is off the quartzite tower, correct?
I'm sorry, are you referring to the 130 call?
Yes.
Yes.
And the terminating tower is the blue one as more into town of Victorville, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. When you drew on exhibit 907 for the defense, you added that azimuth 170, correct?
Yes, I did.
And it overlaps with the service area of azimuth 85, is that correct, in this area?
Yes.
And the line you drew went right through where?
Right through the crime scene.
And again, that service area 120 degrees, that's not an impervious wall, correct?
That's correct.
You were asked by the court the distance between, physical distance between two cell towers. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Is that significant to this historical analysis at all?
It can be. I don't recall exactly which two towers that was from.
Well, I want to go back to, you indicated in your direct testimony, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the cell phone prioritizes based on signal strength, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Is the distance between two physical cell towers always determinative of signal strength?
Distance is a factor from the cell towers, but it's not always the only definitive factor.
Sure. And how the network determines allocation of resources is also up to, or subject to a lot of variable factors. Isn't that true to say?
Yes, I'm not sure how the network makes those decisions, but I imagine there's a number of factors.
Well, during the course of your direct and cross-examination, you were asked about things such as line of sight capability, correct?
Yes,
The line of sight from one tower to another is going to vary from one tower to another, correct?
yes,
The terrain differences between towers is going to vary depending on your geographic location, correct?
that's correct.
Those are things that the network may not have a conscious knowledge of. Would that be fair to say? It's going. Isn't it true? It's just going off the signal strength.
Yeah, the network as it operates, I don't know if I could. I think it would be more speculation if I talk about how a network is ran.
Okay, but it would be a fair statement to say that all of those variables are out of control of the handset when it asks for resources from a tower.
Yes, I mean those are just empirical facts that there's going to be line of sight and signal strength when it comes to the selection of a cell tower.
At any time were you asked to quote unquote geolocate the defendant's cell phone on any of the days you analyzed?
No,
Why not?
because this.
Objection, speculation of why he wasn't asked by this person.
Were you able to, or could you, at any time during your analysis in 2014 up until today?
No,
Why not?
this type of analysis can only provide a general area of where a cell phone was. It cannot precisely locate the cell phone.
So it is a historical analysis, as you've been saying since direct, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you have the exhibits you used yesterday? It's for polls. So I'd like to go back to, we can briefly go back to, turn it to Mr. Jackson, please. Want to now focus highlight this call for you. For the record, it's call number 9083, and it's the call on February 4th at 9:32 p.m. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And it has a cell tower there, and shows mobile to mobile, correct?
Yes, it does.
And that call of 9083, you were asked to document on exhibit 910. If we can do overhead, Mr. Jackson, please. Sorry, I'm gonna make you go back and forth here a second. You documented on here for the defense that cell tower 9083 being in this approximate location, correct?
That's correct.
This was in a conversation regarding 9218 being a quote-unquote flyer. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
Did that leave you any believing any implication of where the defendant was when this call was placed and hit this tower?
No.
Does the fact that this line was drawn from here to here, from defendant's residence location to the Lake Matthews Tower, called 9218, can you tell from that where the defendant was?
No, I do not.
Okay. But more importantly, call number 9083, strike that, back up. Call 9218 was pointed out that it had previous activity hitting the towers around the defendant's residence, correct?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact time, but I think it was within like a minute before or 2 minutes before.
Okay.
There was a call up near the residence.
Close proximity, right, in time. What about 9083? Did you have the same point of reference?
No, there was no calls for a few hours prior to that.
Mr. Jackson, can we go back to attorney 2, please? Thank you. So you said a few hours. Would that be from 6:09 to 9:04 p.m.? There was no corresponding activity to indicate location?
That's correct.
Those were the ones that went directly to voicemail, correct?
Yes, they were routed to voicemail. They were routed to voicemail.
So any implication or inference that could be drawn from 910 would be speculative. Is that correct?
Yes, it's just like any other cell tower hit.
Well, especially any other cell tower hit in the sense of a historical analysis as opposed to active pursuit.
Yes.
You were asked about your previous testimony in a case in Riverside County. You recall that?
Yes.
Those were not AT&T phones, correct?
No, they were not.
Did you review the entire answer you gave to the question that you were asked about on page 17, lines 24, going on to page 18, line 2? Did you have a chance to review that entire thing?
No, I just read a short portion of it during cross-examination.
Let me have you take a look at it so you see the complete answer, not just one sentence out of it.
And Your Honor, I'm gonna object to the form of the question, as soon as facts not evidence, and return a complete answer.
Okay, I finished the through line 2 on page 18.
Well, why don't you read us your complete answer to that question? Or actually, start with the question so we have context.
Sure. So the question asked of me was in reference to some Verizon call detail records. It said, question, and the next column says ORIG, and then C/G. What is that? My response was, that's the originating cell tower. The question back was, what does that mean? And they said, so when a cell phone call is originated, it selects that tower. And when the call is terminated at the end of the call, it ends on a tower. So if you make a short phone call while you are stationary, the odds are you're going to be starting and ending the call in the same tower. If you started a call and then drove for 20 minutes down a highway, you would end that call on a different tower.
Is your testimony in this case any different than what you just read from that previous case?
No, that's an example of how originating and terminating towers can be generated.
Are you familiar with one of those variables that we talked about, terrain, the difference in terrain between Rancho Cucamonga and high desert?
Yes,
Is there something in the way?
it is a mountain range, and then the Cajon Pass that leads up to the high desert.
And those just aren't 2,000-foot hills, are they?
Now, I believe Mount San Antonio is approximately 10,000 to 10,500 feet, somewhere in that range.
Oh, Mr. Jackson, can we turn off? The calls on February 6th, based on your training experience, would you expect someone sitting in Rancho to hit off those towers in Victorville?
No, I would not.
Why not?
The mountain would, first of all, the distance is pretty significant, and then the mountain itself would absorb any energy coming off of those towers and would not penetrate through.
And for each of those calls that logged cell tower data location data, all on February 6th, we're in the high desert, correct?
I believe there was 2 or 3 calls at the end of the day back in Rancho Cucamonga, but the rest were in the high desert, yes.
But the ones we talked about that we focused on, the cross-examination focused on, those were all in the Victor Valley area of the high desert.
Yes, the cell towers were in the high desert.
Anything about your cross-examination change the plotting of the historical data as you did it?
Objection, Anthony.
I'm sorry, can you ask me one more time?
Did anything you were asked on cross-examination change your historical documentation of the historical data on the diagrams that you created?
No.
And the significance of February 6th in hitting those towers, does it remain the same after cross-examination?
Yes.
And would that include the fact that the defendant's phone had not hit on that quartzite tower since July of 2009?
Yes, that was my testimony.
And would that include the fact that the defendant told investigators he had not been to the high desert in the week after February 4th?
Yes, that's what I was told.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything on reading, right?
A couple questions. You mentioned something called bleed over.
Yes, sir.
Where'd you get that term from?
I've heard it in various trainings from instructors and from other cast agents.
Now that 120-degree angle with those firm lines that are drawn for sectors, are those an accurate representation of the range of service for that antenna?
Objection vague as to range of service.
Overruled. Yes.
No, it's just an indication of the direction and the boundaries that we would expect to see.
The beam width.
Yes, sir.
But just because the beam width is 120 degrees doesn't mean that's what the range of service for that antenna would be, correct?
No, to get a true coverage, you would need a drive test.
And there's different types of drive tests, correct? Drive test can show where service can be received, or drive test can show what the range of coverage for an antenna would be.
Yes, the drive tests we do, they do both of those functions.
And so they can have different displays.
It's typically one display, but they shade the colors of the coverage area depending on whether it's a dominant tower in that area or serviceable.
Did you put together a drive test coverage layout for those cell towers in 2010?
No, I did not.
Did you check the FBI computers to see if they had historical drive test data contained within their database?
No.
Is there ever drive test data stored within the database?
Which database are you referring to?
The one, the NBCAC?
Not that I'm familiar with.
Now, the exhibits that you and I went through with the map, the icons that were used, you said you've seen those before.
Yes, I have.
And those are generally used by the RF engineers to show direction of the antenna?
Yes, I don't recall exactly where I've seen them, but I've seen them in various trainings and things. So, yes, I believe they're used regularly.
Are you familiar with the term antenna radiation pattern?
That actual term, no.
The 120-degree sector arms that you drove, based on what there's called your homework, does those lines show the actual coverage for that antenna?
No.
Were they intended to show the coverage of that antenna?
No.
Is it fair to say they're meant to show the direction and possible width of that antenna feed?
Yes, that's a more accurate statement.
So just because a point's within those lines does not mean it's part of the coverage.
No, that's just where we would expect to see the majority of the coverage from that sector.
And I'm gonna show you a document. Recognize this document.
Yes.
Is that the cell tower data for the towers in question that is contained within the FBI computers that show the data for February 2010?
Yes.
Based on review of that document, could you determine for the quasi tower which azimuth antennas go together on a band?
Objection, vague, beyond the scope, and I'm not sure which tower he just referred to.
Sustained as vague as the quasi tower.
The tower on top of the hill, the bigger. Does that document that you produced show you which antennas were grouped together on the different bands?
Yes, if I could have a moment. I could look. Oh, thank you. believe I have it.
And do the records you have show the cell tower ID that were referenced for the calls?
Yes.
Let me be clear. There are different azimuths for the same tower, but the ID number is different on your chart, correct?
Yes, each sector has its own cell ID.
So you can identify which actual one applies to these calls based on the cell tower ID, correct?
Yes, the cell tower ID from the call detail.
Perfect. And based on your review, is the 85-degree azimuth on the same band antennas as the 10 degree?
It is not.
Is the 10-degree and the 170-degree, are those two on the same band antenna tower?
They are.
So that 85 and 1 megahertz and the 10 and the 170 are on the same.
Correct.
But different than the 85.
Yes, the 85-degree sector is in the 850 megahertz band. The 10 and the 170 are in the 1900 megahertz band.
So it's fair to say the 10 and the 170 operate under the same megahertz and band frequency.
The 10 and the 170, yes, those are the same frequency. Well, the same band.
You have on that list, you also pulled the same towers down in
Yes, I was asked to provide all the contacts for the date of the 6th.
and you can identify the ID number for the cell tower antennas that you consider the home tower.
Yes, sir.
You got those in your mind?
Yes,
Okay, perfect. And I'll leave you.
thank you.
I have one. So referring back to the calls that we went over yesterday, that Mr. Imes asked you about, and then we went into February. If I can go back to my computer. Let's go to calls 9,000, 901, and 902, which is February 3rd, 2010, correct?
Yes, sir.
The towers before that call, which was 2 minutes before, what are the towers that were utilized?
16635. And the call after is at 16635 as well for the originate.
And are you familiar with those tower ID numbers?
Yes, those are the ones on here.
And those are what you kept referring to as the home towers.
Yes.
And now the 501 call was from Ms. Jarvis that left a voicemail and they had cell tower data, correct?
Yes, it appears that's the case.
And then 2 minutes later, Ms. Jarvis called again, no cell tower data.
Correct.
And then at the same minute, it appears to be Joseph McStay calling and leaving a voicemail with no cell tower data.
Correct.
And then 16 minutes after that, Ms. Jarvis calls again, voicemail, no cell tower data.
That's correct.
12 minutes after that, client does an outgoing call, looks like to collect his voicemail.
Yes, the VMC indicates like a voicemail check.
Now, based on this, can you say whether or not the phone was off, or if he just has bad coverage when he's at home?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled, he can answer if he has an opinion.
At this point, I would like to confer with AT&T before I provide an answer for that.
Did you you were asked on redirect, about the comments that were made by my client during his interview. Did you review that interview?
I was provided I guess a transcript of some sort. It was a short, like 2-page transcript. I believe it was between Mr. Merritt and an investigator, Bachman.
You understand that conversation happened in the clubhouse of his apartment complex?
Objection calls for speculation, lacks foundation.
Overruled, you can answer if you may.
I don't recall where that took place or if it was even noted in the excerpt that I had.
Did you receive the part of the conversation during the interview where my client was receiving phone calls from Kathy?
Objection, that misstates the evidence. That was with Detective DeGaul.
Sustained with
So did you review or receive the conversation that happened in February of 2010 between my client and Detective?
Objection vague as to detectives.
Detective DeGaul.
overruled.
I don't recall reading the transcript with Detective DeGaul.
Now, there was questions about how the cell phone picks the originating tower and the network picks all other towers after that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is your understanding at least, no matter what the network is doing, it's always trying to give the 2G the strongest signal for the cell phone?
I don't know if that's an accurate statement. The network is the cell phone has to be connected to the network on a tower that has service to the area where the cell phone is at. But the network can control, to a degree, sending that phone to a lesser signal if the load is necessary to balance the load in the network.
So a lot of factors come in.
Yes, sir.
And it's an algorithm beyond all of our comprehension.
Yes, sir.
One second.
Let me interrupt you at this point. It's not new. We'll go ahead and take our new recess till 1:30 this afternoon. Keep in mind the admonitions, not perform or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case, and we'll see everyone back at 1:30.